Glad to have you back. You're still watching Nigeria Decides, and well, if you're just joining us, we're doing some hard talk and some level of assessment of the elections that we had just on Saturday, and it's important to do some review. This time around, Marianne, we're talking about voter apathy and security and the trend of vote buying. But let's start with this package. Yaga has also made some conclusions from the state and governorship elections that we had. State House of Assembly and governorship election, we'll just take that. Okay, well, we'll bring you that report later. But, sirs, let's start with how you would say the elections went in your assessment.
Let's introduce them first, David.
Oh, my goodness.
Anyway, we have joining us Adewale Okunsa. He's a public affairs analyst. Adewale Okunsoya, I beg your pardon. It's good to have you in the studio. And we have the Air Vice Marshal Femi Gbadebo. He's a security expert. It's good to have you in the studio. So, yes, David, you can go on now.
I believe you voted Mr. Gbadebo, right?
Yes, I did.
And how would you describe the election so far from your own lens, and then do an analysis comparing to the other reports you heard so far?
Well, for the presidential elections, there was a lot of tension, and you know, people stayed back, and it was like there was a need to defend their votes, and there was tension as to which party was going. It was essentially between PDP and APC, where I voted in Ajah. And initially there was tension because there was a feeling that it was going to go the way of PDP. But at the end of the day, there was no violence. There was obvious presence of the police, and there was a military truck that came around twice. I stayed there for about 3 hours. So they were kind of patrolling the area, but there was no disturbance. On Saturday, it was quite different. There was no presence of military at all.
From your polling unit?
Yes. And also the touts or hoodlums who you would expect to cause some trouble were missing. Everything was rather calm. The officials arrived on time, and I decided to stay for about 3 hours.
You have good reports
and
there.
What I found was that people just tended to come and vote and leave. And I left there at 2, and that's essentially about 1:30 voting had stopped, but the officials insisted on staying until 2 before they started the count.
But are you impressed with the level of collation of results and announcement? Because we've waited for results much more than 24 hours, and you look at a state like Taraba and they're still collating results. Are you impressed? Because if you are comparing the good reports you've had so far and the realities that be for other states, are you impressed at the stage where we are talking about announcement of results?
You see, even the quality of the, the officials who are reading the reports, you find people who are supposed to be lecturers or above in universities having problems adding figures. There's a lot of fumbling, and you can see some maybe discomfort. Maybe things didn't work as well as it should have. I believe that if you have done your job well and everything's clear, you would come out and just reel out those numbers. You would rehearse even before getting there.
Do you sense some unnecessary, undue pressure on these polling officers?
Those areas where it's taking too long to come out, things just are not right.
Okay, Adewale, let's find out from you. You've been watching. Did you vote? Did you participate?
Yes,
like he has said, was there any clear difference between what you did during the presidential elections compared to what happened during the gubernatorial elections?
Yes, during the presidential election, then people were tensed based on the information. They're going to fight, they're going to hijack the box and the likes. Before, we all know what the president said before the election, that if any ballot box being hijacked, they should be shot. And then people were scared then, people were trying to step away from what they're about to experience. But the last election we had on Saturday is quite different, because most people came out to vote, that is at Lagos mainland, and then everything went well. cool and perfect.
No issues. Vice Marshal, let me just ask. Let's look at the issue of insecurity. Yaga here is complaining that there's been intimidation of INEC officials. They've talked about Adamawa, Borno, Nasarawa, Kwara, Oyo, Rivers, Kaduna, and Zamfara State. Now, they said this in their post-situation room reports, and they raised an alarm also on both sides. But let's look at the security aspect of the elections, because if an INEC official is not safe, our votes are not safe. If we, the people, are not safe, the mandate obviously is not safe. So why do you think that the issue of insecurity is so bad, especially for states like Rivers, Kaduna? And I mean, I heard that a deputy governor was arrested by a police officer. I mean, is there like a mix-up that some people don't even know, or there's a blur of sorts that people don't know the difference between the law and what's not the law?
Well, I'll say, first of all, for Kaduna State, if the police could arrest the deputy governor, then that's a huge plus for the police. For the rest of the country, I think the problem is with the politicians. There's been, they've taken it as a do-or-die thing, and it's interesting that there are some places like Kwara where you would have expected a lot of violence to see that somebody like Saraki read the mood of the people and just decided to let things be. But in some other places, you see the hype, particularly in the Southeast or South-South, the hype has been so much even before the elections that this is going to happen, calling even names of military commanders as being totally against your party and all. I think I never saw anything like that happen when I was serving, because every state has a state security council, and all these heads of the various military agencies are part of the security council. So they're supposed to have been working well together even before the elections. Where you now decide to make such big noise about it, I think there's a problem.
We had in River State where the police and the army had a face-off at INEC's Coalition Center, again, because there was no clear cut as to who's supposed to be there and who's not supposed to be there. So again,
you understand the lead
the issue is, why is there such a blur?
Exactly.
No, the blur is there because somebody controls the money, and the person controlling the money probably has found one particular agency more friendly than the other, and that then creates a bit of a problem. To be honest with you, when Wike started making all that noise before the elections as to the army being compromised, I found that really, really unhealthy. The president is there, the chief of army staff is there to make your complaints. I think our governors should understand the role of the military and the security agencies, all of them put together. And when we begin to make noise in public, calling on international agencies and all, we're making a mess of this thing. You need to go to the Northeast and see what our soldiers have done. Soldiers who have died, lost their lives, they're from all parts of the country. It's not just about being the East-West or something. And being a military man, go to the barracks. What you'll find is a camaraderie that is based on the uniform you're wearing. It has nothing to do where the other man is coming from, and so on. So when you need them to control, to maintain the peace, and you call the military, and then because it's time for elections, you now demonize the military, I don't think it goes down well.
Adewale, also weighing on this, we've seen situations where the army has also made certain arrests. Now we understand that the police is expected to be the lead agency, but how comfortable are you sitting in that chair now, knowing that, well, when we are looking at misconduct and a whole lot more, the army has the power to now arrest individuals? Does this make sense to you, really? Or instead, we should see more collaborative and efforts and interfacing between the police and then the army, and the law, what's expected takes its due course?
Yeah, if we look at that vividly, we will see that most people are more friendly to the police, and then they can easily maneuver to do whatever they want to do at least in the last election, we saw when someone was trying to hijack the ballot paper and the police people were standing by watching them. But if that situation seems to be for the soldiers, you will see that those people will not come because the clothes alone will scare them away from.
But constitutionally, the army has no business with the electioneering process.
But when we look at Nigeria,
I mean, and that's one of the reasons why police officers at polling units are not armed, because that in its own has.
But the lady who was the reports we've had is because of the level of misconduct, ballot box snatching, and other malpractices. But Mr. Gbadebo, are you comfortable with this trend where the army makes arrests now?
Well, it depends on what you mean by arrests. If we look at some of the things that I have seen on social media, there are areas where the army has had to come in and even arrest some uniformed personnel. You see, we are living in a very difficult period now where some politicians actually have their own thugs dressed in military or police uniforms. And so when you see a video and it looks like uniformed men, you need to do a proper or forensic analysis of that video to know whether it is actually the army operating
in a proper
or
scenario.
is a staged
In a proper scenario, wouldn't you have expected that they hand over those persons taken over, okay, let's use the word arrested, and hand them over to the police?
Well, you see, ideally the modus operandi is that the police is in charge anywhere in the country once it's an internal situation. Now, it gets to a stage where the police commissioner sees that he's overwhelmed, and then he's the one who calls in the army for backup, for reinforcement and stuff like that. But when you have things happening in such quick motion as we have seen, there's a cloud. Like I'm saying, the atmosphere that had been created in Rivers was such that I would think the brigade commander would also need to cover his tracks. So when, like, you have situations where some personnel have, civilians have been arrested wearing military uniform, okay, then it leads you to begin to question some of those videos going around. Are they really military personnel or staged operations? Okay, because you see, there's a GOC, General Officer Commanding, that oversees the whole area. The Chief of Army Staff is there in Abuja, who's over there. It is not in his best interest to see his uniform being ridiculed. The same thing for the other services that are there. So the situation I'm seeing in that area needs a lot more, a closer look than what we're seeing.
Should security agents, be it the Army, the Air Force, even the police, even if it's the NSCDC, be seen to be in alliance with whatever politician, whether it's the government in power or the opposition? Do you not think that maybe there's been a lacuna that has been created, hence the reason why people are beginning to say, oh, the army is somewhat compromised, the police is compromised? If security agencies stood their ground and were not in any way, by the way, involved with these skirmishes, maybe we would be a bit trusting towards them, don't you think so?
You see, by bringing the army out of the barracks, which is something that has been on ground for more than 40 years now, we have compromised a lot of things. The State Security Council that I mentioned to you is a council that meets minimum once a month. So there's already a camaraderie that builds up. You see what happens every time there's a new commissioner of police, a new brigade commander, or a new whatever else commander, they pay a courtesy call to the governor.
From the governor, yes.
You understand? Yes. And then over the years, right from the time of the Bakassi crisis and so on, we've had a situation where adequate funding is not necessarily coming from the top, where the state governors are having to assist with some ration or whatever. So this has created a kind of relationship between the commander and ground and the governors. Now, it is possible that governors may ask for certain services and some commanders do not agree, and then they look like the bad ones. It could also happen that some governors have made up their mind that why do you keep sending maybe a commander from a particular area to my place and begin to feel that it is meant for some service. But I'll tell you, every military man has his allegiance pledged to the state. Loyalty is to the state. And the state is the, the state is the commander-in-chief. So commander-in-chief may be in a party. It does not mean that the governor, the commander, or the chief of army staff is loyal only to him. His is to maintain the peace.
Adewale, what cues or lessons do you think we should have learnt now from the Presidential and National Assembly elections to now the governorship and State House of Assembly elections, when we are talking about security this time around, improving, whether it's about strategizing and deployment, what roles each individual bodies are expected to play? What lessons should we learn from this elections that we've held so far, so that we don't make the same mistakes when we are counting as we're counting down to 2023, because the election cycle is already in motion again?
Yes, if we look at the previous election and the presidential, what I've learned from there is that everybody has a role to play, as we all know, but they need more clarification. Like, okay, Mr. A, this is where to cover. Mr. B, this is where to cover. Not that everybody will now comes together, working in a role, and they don't really get what they are doing. It's not possible for me now to have my own role to play, and then I leave my own duties, and then facing another one.
But the acting IGP said, well, he made it clear in all of his responses that they are having interagency collaboration. Every individual of the different security apparatus are going to be independent yet working together, professional, neutral, and patriotic.
Yes, one thing I would just say about that is that, like I said earlier, that they need more clarification. Working together at times, they're supposed to have a role to play. This is your role to play, and this is your role to play. This is what is expected of you. So that at the end of the day, everybody will come together and give report of this is what we've covered so far. Everything will not be mixed up, just like what we had now between the police and the army.
ABM, let's just, because we're running out of time. Going forward, we have 2023 already knocking on our doors, even though we still have inconclusive results and we're still battling with some states. But how should security agencies behave themselves? Because it puts us, we the citizens, in a tense, position, and we're wondering what is becoming of this nation. And for people like you who have been in service for a long time, you obviously would be in a better position to maybe play an advisory role. If you were to advise these security agents and agencies, what would it be?
You see, we have to stop being afraid of the army. The army has been a part and parcel. You see, when it's time to do things like this, politicians create a lot of the semblance of the army being, if I can use the word, mad dogs. And that's not the case. The army has done extremely well, or the armed forces have done extremely well in maintaining the peace. You see, like in the South, there's been an ongoing operation after another being done by the army, and you can't change the rules. I think the problem here is a situation where we have given INEC so much financial power. You see, when people talk about the budget for INEC being so large, it is because of the way it's been operated. I think in some other countries, if the army or the police need new equipment, they need to be better trained and so on, then their budget or extra budgetary allocation should be made for them. You see, it's like if some television stations need to cover things, I don't think it is the place of INEC to now pay those television stations. It should be either from Ministry of Information or so. So the budget should be spread in such a way that, yes, it's for election, but then we sort out those things that are meant for INEC, and then the other things that are meant for the agencies to go there. And then the other agencies should also work together to rehearse and practice and so on. The money for this election came out late, and you can imagine what has happened. I think what happened in 2015 when, Jega just finished the elections and disappeared was not right. This chairman needs to tidy up. He needs to conclude and write a proper report. And if possible, if Nigerians would allow, he should be given a second tenure. You understand? Nobody gets it right the first time. Yes. And in the process of his second tenure, he should also be setting in place some kind of, mentorship, and
whoever is going to take over from him.
If not even take over, but at least within the system to have people who will do that. If you look, you see, INEC took on so much responsibility. If you look at the various electoral commissioners, state commissioners, you will see such a disparity. Some of them look so mature and in control, and some of them you look so young, or at least so, ill-equipped for the role that they've been given. And that, I think, comes from that small organization just blowing up and taking on so much responsibility. So this period that we're going in, training for their staff should come in, and then other things. And it can do a lot of things, a lot of training, should come in.
For its people.
Thank you very much for speaking with us. We've been having a nice conversation with Adewale Okosoya, who's a public analyst. Thank you very much for your contribution, and as well Femi Gbadebo, as well a security expert. And hopefully we learn lessons from this election and implement them, because we can't make the same mistake twice.
We can't be talking about this in 2023, hopefully. Well, we'll take a short break. When we come back, there's more to talk, as we are still looking at the issues surrounding the governorship and the Houses of Assembly's elections. It's still Election Studio on Plus TV Africa.